Thank you. Excellencies and honored delegates, I'm pleased to present my thematic report on the right to academic freedom, which I'm sure you'll agree is timely given the rising restrictions on academic freedom and freedom of expression in academic settings throughout the world. Before turning to my report, let me highlight two current issues on the right to education and academic freedom, both relating to Gaza. Since October, multiple mandate holders have repeatedly issued statements regarding the situation in Israel and Gaza. We unequivocally condemned targeted and deadly violence directed at civilians in Israel and violent, indiscriminate attacks against Palestinian civilians in Gaza. We expressed dismay at the flagrant violation of international law by Israel, indiscriminate and disproportionate killing of children, women, and men of all ages, the weaponization of humanitarian assistance and essentials, targeting of shelters, the destruction of civilian infrastructure. In April, we sounded the alarm on the systematic attacks on schools, universities, teachers, and students that suggest an intentional effort to comprehensively destroy the Palestinian education system known as scholasticide. Our demands for an immediate ceasefire, ending blockades and restrictions on life-saving aid, the urgency of international action and accountability to pressure Israel to comply with international law, and decisive international action to end the bloodshed, including the stopping of flow of arms, pointing out the possible complicity of states, arms manufacturers, and banks in the carnage, were not heeded. Sadly, this vividly illustrates our lack of capacity as human rights monitoring mechanisms to protect people in the most vulnerable situations. Related to this is the response to student protests. I officially visited the United States of America from 29th April to 10th May this year, and I thank the government for the invitation and cooperation. My visit coincided with anti-war demonstrations at universities, including encampments on campus premises, calling for a ceasefire and for universities to review investments with Israel. I will present my report next year, but I have already conveyed my alarm at the violent crackdown on peaceful demonstrators, including academics being dismissed, students suffering broken bones, hospitalizations, suspensions, expulsions, being blacklisted as supporters of terrorism, threatened with deportation, and moves to dissolve student unions and associations. Student protests expressing solidarity with civilians in Gaza and denouncing Israeli military actions have also taken place in many other countries and received similar treatments: arrests, detentions, police violence, surveillance, disciplinary measures, and sanctions against members of the educational community exercising their right to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. Of concern is the unequal treatment of those expressing themselves. Pro-Palestinian protesters, including Jewish people, confront disproportionately harsh responses, allegedly for anti-Semitic views, which are equated and conflated with criticisms of the State of Israel. All states must prohibit the advocacy of any views that constitute incitements to violence, hostility, or discrimination. However, the expression of a critical political opinion is not and will never be a legitimate ground to restrict freedom of expression. Expressing support for or opposition to a specific government is fully guaranteed by the rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, and otherly gendered good people. My current report calls for acknowledging academic freedom as being as crucial as a free press or independent judiciary. Worldwide submissions show that in every region, people exercising their academic freedom face harassment, retaliation, repression, imprisonment, sometimes even death. Moreover, the commodification of education and encroachment of a multitude of actors introduce deeply worrying biases in academic research and free thinking. Patterns of violations resemble attacks against an independent media, free civil society, and artistic expressions. There are both direct and violent repression and more subtle means, particularly through funding, which deserve the same level of attention. I'm especially worried by curtailments of institutional autonomy, increased surveillance of students and staff, new public management techniques, digitalization and artificial intelligence that all impact academic freedom. My next report to the GA is on AI. Prohibiting specific subjects and banning books in schools and libraries too deserve attention. There are multiple actors, governments, of course, but also religious, political groups or figures, armed and terrorist groups, narco-traffickers, corporate entities and philanthropists, but sometimes also the educational institutions themselves, school boards, staff, parents, associations, and students. Academic freedom is the freedom to access, disseminate, and produce information, to think freely, to develop, express, apply, and engage with a diversity of knowledge within or related to one's own expertise or field of study, regardless of whether it takes place inside or outside the academic community. Academic freedom is about creating and disseminating knowledge, and we must not politicize its exercise. Curtailment seriously threaten both democracy and our capacity to collectively respond to crises facing humanity. The international law basis for freedom, academic freedom, is found amongst other provisions in the right to freedom of opinion and expression, with which it overlaps but is distinguished by the special duties to seek truth and impart information according to ethical and professional standards and to respond to contemporary problems and needs of all society. Ensuring academic freedom requires institutional autonomy, so academic research and teaching institutions themselves must respect academic freedom. They must respect the international standards of freedom of expression. A primary teaching task being facilitating students to develop their own academic skills, including by mediating diverse views, means the right to freedom of expression includes teaching. Institutions have a specific responsibility to promote debate around controversies that may arise on campuses while adhering to academic standards. I believe this challenging path must be followed, including on issues deemed controversial. I stress academic freedom is intrinsic to the entitlement to receive and promote quality education and must be protected at all levels of education. It includes 4 interdependent pillars: the right to teach, to engage in discussions and debates, and to conduct research and to disseminate opinions and research results. All researchers, educators, and students are entitled to academic freedom, taking into consideration the developing capacities and maturity of students. Academic freedom is a human right, not a professional freedom, limited to educational personnel or universities. It should be enjoyed wherever teaching and scientific research occur. All educators should enjoy the right to teach and engage in the classroom in keeping with the standards and norms of the scholarly enterprise. We must understand the vitality of free expression in the learning, educational, discovery process and ensure that the processes for accrediting school textbooks, imposing or prohibiting specific subjects, align with the aims of education under international human rights law. Teachers can only foster critical thinking if they themselves enjoy academic freedom while simultaneously upholding the principles of pluralism, respect for others, and the pursuit of knowledge. As all educational levels are interrelated and influence each other, ensuring quality education, both content and pedagogy, requires synergies across levels. I draw your attention to the principles for implementing the right to academic freedom. Drafted by a working group of UN experts, scholars, and civil society actors, and based on international law and practice. These are important guidelines for ensuring academic freedom, and I call for their endorsement and implementation by all. Excellencies and delegates, I visited Finland in November 2023 and thanked the government for its facilitation and excellent cooperation. In Helsinki, Turku, and Åland Islands, I met a wide range of officials, visited educational institutions, and held discussions with academics, civil society actors, teachers, students, as well as their unions and associations. Finland's public educational system enjoys a well-deserved reputation for excellence. Education is designed to accommodate diverse needs and circumstances, support individuals to reach their full potential in lifelong learning with no dead ends. Benefiting from committed personnel, education has highly qualified teachers and cascading autonomy from national entities to regional authorities, municipalities, principals, and teachers. I commend Finland's firm commitment to international human rights standards and SDG 4 to narrow differences in learning outcomes, offer equal opportunities, increase participation of underrepresented groups, and strengthen well-being. Today, the system that has worked so admirably is facing some critical challenges, in particular due to greater diversity in backgrounds and increasing presence of digital technology in education. It's an opportune moment to reflect on the best way forward. For example, despite a high level of trust in teachers and the educational system, there's an increasing shortage of teachers, especially in early childhood education and care, special needs education, and education in minority languages. I have recommended developing targeted teacher retention policies with teachers, ensuring teachers are familiar with new legislation policies and emerging issues, human rights and the rights of the child, and enhancing critical digital literacy. Legislation protecting paid leave for continuous professional development of teachers should also be considered. I applaud Finland as a global leader in developing and implementing anti-bullying programs, including preventative measures and for strengthening social, emotional, and interactive skills and promoting mental well-being. Support is not uniformly available, however. School psychologists and social workers have little time for individual consults and may not be students' first choice. New initiatives, however, such as youth workers, school coaches, and multilingual assistants are highly appreciated and deserve extension. I commend the efforts to support migrant students, persons with disabilities, speakers of languages other than Finnish and Swedish, including sign language. Yet gaps in outcomes and well-being persist. For this, learning support, including individual learning paths, should be increased, especially in transition phases. Finally, digitalization requires a robust, multi-stakeholder discussion to safeguard against negative health implications, protection of privacy on online data, and the risk of inadvertent privatization of education through platformization and digital tools. Thank you. I look forward to our interaction.